Does every month look the same financially? Do you feel like you're stuck in the movie Groundhog Day? Well, one reason for that just might be that you use the word but, too much. Yes, the word but. The one word that your English teacher or maybe a grandparent told you erases everything that you said prior. If you want to change financially, you have to replace the word but with two other very important words. I'll explain coming up in this podcast. This is the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we help normal, everyday people like you take control of your finances so that you can live a happier, less stressful life. My name is Chris Hawkins, and I will be your host for today's episode. From 2005 to 2008, my wife and I paid off just under $100,000 in debt, and we have been debt free except for our house for over 15 years now. I want to take you back to the year 2012. I had just finished my doctoral dissertation, which, by the way, was in the area of financial education. And I had just started thinking about becoming a financial coach. And I thought, man, I want to go out and I want to do speaking engagements. I want to become the next radio host. And I want to write books. And I started looking for how to become better at public speaking. And I joined an international group called Toastmasters. Now, Toastmasters, it's a worldwide organization and it's designed to help people improve their public speaking and leadership skills. And so I joined a local club. And about 6 months after I joined, there was a group of people who wanted to start an advanced Toastmasters club. We decided to incorporate improv. And for those of you who may not be familiar with improv, think of, if you've ever seen the show Whose Line Is It Anyway?, where they make up everything on the fly. And so we would do improv scenes as a way to build our humorous skills, as a way to work on our body language, our vocal variety, our creativity. And so we learned that there are rules to improv. There are things that you have to do in order for a scene to go successfully. And the very first rule of improv, at least the way that we learned it in that advanced Toastmasters club, the first rule was yes and. YESAND, two words. Yes and. Now, here's what that principle means. In an improv scene, let's suppose that I'm working with somebody and the audience suggests that we're at a zoo. And I open the scene and I say, look at that zebra over there. And the person that I'm doing the scene with me says, that's not a zebra. Well, what that person just did is they didn't say yes. They didn't agree that that was a zebra. So in essence, by saying that's not a zebra, they have killed the whole scene. So if you watch really good improv, people do improv, whatever the first person says, the other people go along with it and they elevate it. And so the principle of yes and means that in an improv scene, you agree. You don't disagree, because as soon as you disagree, you've killed the scene. There's nowhere for the story to go. And so you always have to agree by saying yes and then do something in response to that. Now, what the heck does this have to do with personal finance? Well, a few months ago, my son for Father's Day bought me a subscription to Masterclass. And I've been going through some of the courses on there. And I saw one that was called Prepare to Be Unprepared by Amy Poehler of Saturday Night Live fame. I think Parks and Recreation was another show that she was on. And I got excited because I'm like, oh, this is a course on improv. Well, she started off the first episode or the first lesson by talking about she was going to use the rules of improv, but she was going to show us that those rules can be used anywhere in our life, that they don't just apply to improv. And so she went through all the rules of improv and didn't teach improv, but rather taught a class or lessons on how to take each of those principles of improv and apply them to our life. And it got me thinking, well, the first one is yes and. And how many times in our financial life do we hear something like this podcast, like the Debt Free Dad podcast, or something in the Roots course, or maybe something in one of the Facebook groups that seems to be a lot different than anything that we've ever heard? For example, why not pay cash for your cars? Well, if your response is, well, I can't, or but there's nowhere for you to go. You have just stuck yourself in the status quo. So if somebody says, keep your car and save up money to pay cash, and you go, but my car is beginning to break down, you've just used the word but. And what that means is you're more than likely going to go and borrow money to buy a car, probably a brand new car, and you're going to be stuck with payments. And you're going to be upside down, meaning you're going to owe more for that car than it's worth. And you've just dug yourself a bigger financial hole. A better response when somebody says, hey, don't go out and buy a brand new car, keep your car, save what you think you have as the car payment to help you 9, 10, 12 months, maybe a year and a half down the road to buy a better used car. The response using what I learned in improv is yes, that's a good idea. And how do I do it? And that is a way that you can begin to think differently. That is a way that you can begin to put new ideas in your mind. That is a way that you can begin to remove yourself from the status quo. That is a way that you can start to turn away from all the financial mistakes that you've made in the past. And so when you see comments on Facebook groups, for example, one that I get is, or I've seen quite a bit, is how do I improve my credit score? And of course, inevitably, there will be comments that say, well, don't focus on your credit score. And the person will say, but I need to get my credit score up so I can buy a car. Right there, using the word but, whether it's spoken, whether it's typed out on a Facebook group or something, is your way of rejecting the advice that someone is giving you. So try using yes and, meaning when someone gives you some advice, or when you learn something in the Roots of Personal Finance course, or you hear something on the Debt Free Dad podcast, don't dismiss it. Don't say but. Stop and say yes. So when we hear us talk about one of the best things you can do is start a budget, your response shouldn't be, but I don't know how. Right there, you just threw a roadblock up. You killed the scene. There's nothing else is going to happen. Let's suppose that you don't know how to do a budget and you hear us talk about the importance of needing to do a budget. Yes, I'm going to start a budget and I'm going to learn how to do it. That's how you use yes and. And I could go on with example after example after example of ways that we use but, that we really need to replace it with yes and, meaning don't reject the advice, don't dismiss it, give it a try. Try something different. And when you try something different, you just might get a different result. And when you listen to people like those of us on this podcast, when you learn or take the lessons in the Roots of Personal Finance, when you learn from the people who are in the Facebook groups and they have done what you want to do and they're telling you to do something totally different than what you think you should be doing, the correct response should always be yes and. So use those two words to change your financial trajectory and put you on a path to financial success.